Today, I'm going to review the 2023 Clemson football season, and I'm going to try to make this as painless as possible. But first, welcome to Clemson Football Live. I am Brian. I'm glad you're here. I hope you subscribe. It's the freest and easiest way to support the channel. Let's dive in. I predicted in the preseason that Clemson would go 11-1 with a potential to go 12-0. But let's face it, it's very difficult to go undefeated. Even people who hates Clemson predicted that they would lose to Duke and then run the table. So needless to say, there were a lot of expectations. Garrett Riley had been hired. There was no more DJ drama. It was just Cade Klubnik running the show. Then Duke happened. It was a Monday night, Labor Day night, opening game in Durham. It was bizarre. It was odd. I still can't shake the ridiculous feeling. But needless to say, that would sum up that game very well and at least the first 8 games of the 2023 season. It stunk.
Stings the nostrils.
Now, Clemson's offense rushed for over 200, passed for over 200, had 12 more first downs than Duke, and even had the ball for over 7 minutes longer. But you cannot overcome fumbling the ball twice inside the 10, shanked field goals, and just once again, a complete letdown of an evening. If you go back and watch the game, Clemson was down 13-7 at the beginning of the fourth quarter, right before they fumbled the football. And we saw Cade Klubnik run down a defender after he tried to scoop and score. Good run, Cade. But Clemson loses the ball game 28-7, and everyone was shocked. Shell-shocked probably would be the best term, because Clemson had better athletes than Duke, and I know Duke had a good season in 2022, but they didn't play Florida State, and they didn't play Clemson then, so there was kind of an asterisk there. Now, that Duke team who beat Clemson 28-7 no longer exists. Mike Elko is at Texas A&M. Half the team, including Riley Leonard, is playing for Notre Dame now, so there's that. But that game was what it was, and it set the tone for the season. Now, the very next week, which was only 5 days later, Clemson played in Death Valley. Now, that was an extremely exciting time because the new Tiger Walk was open. It's a beautiful area. It leads the team right into the stadium. If you haven't been there and walked it, you need to do it. Trust me, it's worth it. But they played Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern, unfortunately, played us a little tougher in the beginning. They were actually beating Clemson, especially after that pick six that made everyone in Death Valley boo. Even people who normally will never even think about booing, they were booing. Why? Because just 5 days earlier, you got blown out by Duke by 3 touchdowns. It wasn't supposed to happen. And now you're throwing a pick six against Charleston Southern. Well, we know what happened. Clemson overcame the small school from Charleston, beat them 66-17. Now, around this time, players like Cole Turner and Antonio Williams are already getting bit by the injury bug.
I'm sitting here with a bloody stump of a foot.
We needed someone to emerge, and that person was about to show up on the scene in a few weeks. Florida Atlantic, the Fighting Tom Hermans.
You confirm those reports are false.
Come to Death Valley, and Clemson took care of business in this game. Clemson beat Florida Atlantic 48-14. It was a Saturday night game. Everybody starts to breathe a little easy. Maybe what happened at Duke was just a fluke. And we know that we better get our act together because Florida State is coming to town. This is the best Florida State team that they've had since famous Jameis was down at Florida State. And we had to get our act together. We had to. Jordan Travis was extremely impressive in this game. No matter how much Clemson kept hitting him, he kept getting up. It was only when we backed off of him that he started completing passes to those giants he calls wide receivers. Also throw in there that the Sweeney boys helped their dad find a kicker. Introducing Jonathan White.
Hello, dog.
Yes, this is a guy who had been on the football team for a while and then just basically called it. He was like, you know what? I've been on the team for a while now. I'm done. I'm an online graduate student. So he moves to Charleston, South Carolina. And then he gets a call right before he moves to New York. Hey, would you like to come kick for Clemson against Florida State. Now, he came up. I know he missed a kick in the game. It would have been the game winner. But, folks, I will tell you this. I don't blame that guy whatsoever for missing that kick. He was on a totally different trajectory in life. And then we call him up because, well, we were ill prepared with kicking. I know Robert Gunn was supposed to be a 5-star kicker, but I mean, I'm not taking a shot at him there. I'm just saying, how ill prepared can you be? And it bit us in that game. The emergence of Tyler Brown happened in the Florida State game. He had to step up because Antonio Williams was bit by the injury bug. And this 3-star out of Greenville, South Carolina, came up big time. This guy was the leading receiver for the Florida State game with 5 receptions and 84 yards. Not too shabby to do that as a true freshman against the toughest team you would play all year long. Florida State played a great game. Clemson played a great game. But in overtime, Florida State won. And now Clemson is 0-2 in the conference. They're 2-2 overall. And people are beginning to get fidgety. The very next week, we play Syracuse. Now, our old friend Dino Babers is no longer with us.
I see dead people.
I'm talking about Syracuse. He's still alive. But I'm just saying, he's always been a problem for Clemson. No matter if they had Trevor Lawrence, he was still a problem. Clemson goes up to Syracuse, 0-2 in the conference, 2-2 overall. Clemson goes in and beats them. The defense looked fantastic. XT was XTing, and Clemson goes on to win the football game, 31-14. It's at this point, to me, the season got really weird. Wake Forest comes to town. Now, this is a Wake Forest team, not like some of the good Sam Hartman teams. This is just your run-of-the-mill, subpar Wake Forest teams. And listen, this was homecoming. I know someone who went to the game. They said this was one of the most boring games they'd ever witnessed in their entire life. On homecoming, Clemson barely beats Wake Forest 17-12. Transparently, that's when I started becoming more pessimistic. Clemson had the very next week off, and I was hoping they would pull their crap together because they're playing Miami. Now, during this time is when Miami has that whole debacle with Georgia Tech, where Cristobal held his middle finger up to the fundamentals of football, and they said, oh, no, you don't. And his team, instead of kneeling the football and taking the win, they fumbled it and then went on to allow Georgia Tech to throw a massive pass to beat them in the final moments of the game.
And just take a knee.
That's who we were about to play in Miami. Clemson would lose this game, not to Tyler Van Dyke, but to a 6'5" freshman named Emory Williams. You also have to remember that at one time, Clemson was up 17-7 in this game. And it all comes down to that last play where Cade pulls the football in overtime and tries to outrun a defender. He lost that race, and Clemson lost another game. So after the 28-20 loss to Miami in overtime, Clemson had to travel to Raleigh and play our old friend Dave up there. He just loves him some Clemson. And we love us some Dave.
In a basketball school, he can kiss my...
Now, we didn't have to play Virginia transfer quarterback Brennan Armstrong, the redheaded lefty who had a ton of yardage a few years ago. No, we had to play this ambitious, energetic youngster named MJ Morris, who, by the way, is no longer with NC State. He came in and had Clemson down 24-7 at one point. I mean, even in the Duke game, it was still winnable at the beginning of the fourth. And then suddenly something happened with Clemson. They flipped a switch, and they were suddenly back in the ball game. And as the camera panned across the crowd at Carter Finley, you could see their shoulders drooped because they knew that Clemson was coming back. Unfortunately, Clemson stopped being so aggressive. They went back to playing it safe, and they lost yet a fourth game of the season, 2-4 in the conference, and the possibility of a 10-win season. Yes, a 13th consecutive 10-win season was thrown out the window. An ACC championship appearance was just quite laughable. And in the Clemson community, well,
We're at the threshold of hell!
we were at the threshold of hell. And it was only going to get worse. On the following Monday night, the now infamous call from Tyler from Spartanburg happened. That can't happen too many more times in Clemson because it's going to make us look bad.
Give a crap how much money I make.
It was also rumored after the NC State game that Dabo was overheard telling some of his coaches that, well, you have a lot to prove to me if you want to come back next season. One of those coaches is no longer with the team. I think he should have fired a few more. I'll leave it at that. Clemson had to play against Notre Dame the very next week. Now, Notre Dame at this point has only lost one ball game. They have a lot to play for. Game against Notre Dame, we saw Phil Maffa take over. Why? Will Shipley was injured. So they start Phil Maffa, and he rushed for 186 yards. And one of my favorite photos of that entire game shows Phil running, breaking loose like he did most of the game, and the Notre Dame players trying to run him down. Phil put the team on his shoulders and beat Notre Dame when Notre Dame had a lot to fight for, including the bowl game. This was the beginning of a 5-game winning streak, and what a way to do it with 186 yards rushing on the ground with Phil Maffa and beating the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now, at that time, I put out a video asking, are these last 3 games the most important games in the recent Dabo Swinney era? I said I believed it was, and I think, at least for this season, it definitely is. Now, in the next game, Clemson played the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and I know they're not amazing, but they're a lot better than they have been. And Brent Key's doing a pretty good job in Atlanta. That's a tough gig. They came in, Clemson beat them 42-21. We passed for over 200 yards, rushed for over 200 again. Phil Maffa put the team on his shoulders and just pounded away. Cade Klubnik threw 4 touchdowns in this game, and we were well on our way to a 2-game winning streak with the North Carolina Tar Heels coming up the very next week. Now, playing North Carolina is not that easy. I mean, you have Drake May to deal with, but you also have Omarion Hampton, which is one of the top rushers in all of college football, and Tez Walker. It's not an easy task. The North Carolina Tar Heels actually had over 450 total yards, but Clemson still won the ball game 31-20. We had 466 of our own total yards, so we beat North Carolina. All we have to play now in the regular season is the chick from Columbia. Now, transparently, losing by 1 point because our offensive coordinator stopped running the football in 2022 didn't sit so well with us Clemson fans. Even very devout South Carolina fans were asking me, why'd y'all stop running the football? Because we couldn't stop it. I said, you can tell a now Georgia analyst, thank you for that. But this game was ugly. I'll take a win. I'll take a win. All right, just chill. But it was an ugly ball game. Thank God for Khalil Barnes. Notices that the pass from Spencer Rattler out to his receiver was a backwards pass. And young Khalil, freshman Khalil Barnes, tracks it down and runs it all the way back for a touchdown. Khalil wasn't done. On the very next drive, the ball was thrown up, and Khalil Barnes, being Khalil Barnes, jumped up and picked off the pass. It was an incredible catch. Phil Maffa rushed for almost 90 yards. Cade Klubnik had a tough day. He only passed for 100 yards in the game. But this was not an impressive game across the board, unless you were Khalil Barnes or if you were Jonathan Watts, who hit a 50-yard field goal in this game. In fact, when they trotted him out there to kick one of his 3 made field goals in the game, thank you, Jonathan Watts, I was like, what are y'all doing? But he hit them. And because of him, Clemson won the ball game 16-7. Yes, the 9-point difference came at the foot of a man who wasn't even on the football team at the beginning of the year. So the Tigers gets revenge on South Carolina. They complete a 4-game win streak. They're 8-4, and then they are waiting to see who they will play and in what bowl. Now, going into the Gator Bowl, we knew a little bit about Kentucky because their quarterback is former NC State quarterback Devin Leary. Of course, everyone knows about Ray Davis, and Baron Brown did put on a clinic in the Gator Bowl. He had the 100-yard return for touchdown, the opening kickoff of the second half. Great job, coverage team. And he had some good receptions. But the Tigers, who at one point were down 21-10 going into the fourth, did rally thanks to the defense and 4 turnovers. The defense went savage in the fourth quarter, and so did Phil Maffa. Now, Maffa didn't have 200 yards on the ground. He finished with 11 carries and 71 yards, and he had to take over the bulk of the carries towards the end of the game because Will Shipley got hurt. Phil Maffa set a Gator Bowl record for 4 rushing touchdowns in the ball game after being down 21-10 in the third quarter going into the fourth. Clemson wins the ball game 38-35. Now, Clemson finished the season 9-4, and congratulations to them on winning 5 consecutive games. They were at a very, very bad place after that NC State game, and I'm very happy about that. But I want to send a special shout out to the players. I want to send a special shout out to guys like XT, who has battled through so many physical and even mental problems. He could have given up. He didn't. Thanks for coming back, man, and I wish you the best. I look at guys like Phil Maffa, who has played second fiddle to Will Shipley. I'm not knocking Shipley. I know he's had some injuries this year, and he's given us some great moments. But in the time where everyone will transfer if they're not the man, Phil Maffa has stayed at Clemson. And because of him, we can credit him with winning the Kentucky game, winning the Notre Dame game, and we could even possibly say a few more games. I appreciate it. And the defense just kept showing up. They kept showing out. And I want to say a special thanks to Jonathan Watts. It was unfair of us to ask what we asked of you. You were on a totally different path in life. You suited up. You came out and played, of all people, Florida State, and then stuck with the team. And because of you, you hit a 52-yard field goal against Kentucky. You hit 3 field goals, including a 50-yarder, against South Carolina, and that was the difference. I appreciate you coming out. And to everyone who continued to play when most people would quit, congratulations to you. It says a lot about you. Now, in the coming weeks, I'm going to record a prediction video for the 2024 season. But I will say this. You can't win them all. I get that. But in some of these games, how we lost them, you can't lose them that way. It's not okay. And to me, it says that there's more coaching changes that needs to be made. I think we'll see that in the next year or so. But congratulations to this team. Congratulations to our fans for hopefully not having a heart attack. And as always, go Tigers.